This is a deep dive podcast covering articles published on Ecogate's blog, brought to you by Ecogate, the leader in on-demand dust collection.
Dust collection, it runs all day. Burning watts, blowing cash away. Dust collection, forgot to close the gate. Why the air flow low? And the cost so quick, no more. Turn your air flow into the cash flow. Saving thousands, literally thousands.
With the you watch your savings grow.
You know, when you think about industrial security, dust collection, it isn't exactly the first thing that comes to mind. But you wanted to know what makes Ecogate's greenBOX so secure. And honestly, after digging into the tech, I'm kind of blown away. They're not just locking the front door. They've built Fort Knox in there.
What's fascinating here is how Ecogate approached security from the ground up. It's like they asked, if we were going to build the most secure dust collection system possible, what would that look like? And then they actually did it.
Exactly. They call it security-centric architectural design. And it's not just marketing fluff. They're using this really cool thing. It's called a configuration as code approach, basically. Imagine all the greenBOX's settings and configurations, like they're treated like lines of code in a secure program.
This is a big deal
Yeah.
because it takes human error out of the equation. No more manual tweaks that could accidentally open up security holes. Everything is controlled, automated, and much harder to mess with. This means you're less likely to experience system crashes or security breaches, keeping those operations running smoothly.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's say a hacker tries to get in from the outside. What's stopping them?
Okay, think of the greenBOX's network security like a fortress, right? With layers of defense. First, there are no open doors, or in technical terms, no external port forwarding. The greenBOX initiates connections when it needs something, but it doesn't leave any open ports for hackers to exploit.
Sneaky. So how does it send and receive data without those open ports?
That's where the encrypted tunnels come in. All communication with the greenBOX is encrypted, so even if someone intercepts the data, it's just gibberish without the decryption key.
Okay, so no sneaking in through open doors.
Yeah.
And all the data is locked up tight. What else have they got?
Every good fortress needs a gatekeeper,
Right.
and that's where the firewall comes in. It controls what's allowed in and out of the network, like a really strict bouncer.
And this bouncer only lets in specific protocols, right? Like SSH and HTTPS.
Exactly. SSH is interesting because it can be used for good or evil, but the greenBOX only allows it with pre-approved keys. Think of it like a special knock that only authorized technicians know.
So even if someone had the key, they could just wander around doing whatever they want.
You got it. That's where RBAC, or role-based access control, comes in. It's like giving someone a key to the castle, right?
Right.
But they can only access certain rooms.
You might get through the front door, but you can't just waltz into the royal treasury.
Right. And to add another layer of security, whenever Ecogate's technicians need to access the greenBOX remotely, they use a secure VPN connection called Tailscale.
We've talked about Tailscale before, and it's seriously impressive stuff. But for those who haven't heard those episodes, remind us why this is so secure.
Imagine, you're a technician on the other side of the world. Tailscale essentially teleports you directly inside the fortress. With an encrypted tunnel, no need to cross any risky drawbridges or leave any doors ajar.
Okay, let's say I'm a hacker looking at this setup. Where would I even start?
Honestly, you'd probably move on to an easier target. Ecogate hasn't cut corners here. They've built a system that's incredibly secure.
But even the toughest fortresses need updates, right? Software vulnerabilities are a real threat. How does Ecogate handle that?
You're right, which is why they've built a system for seamless and secure updates. They use something called Mender over-the-air updates, which is like updating your phone, but for an industrial-grade system.
Explain how that's different from just patching a few lines of code. What makes this approach so special?
Imagine patching a hole in a wall versus replacing the entire section of the wall with a brand new, reinforced one. That's essentially what Mender does with its image-based updates. It swaps out the entire software image, ensuring you're always running the most secure and up-to-date version with minimal hassle.
This is seriously impressive stuff. It's like they've considered every angle. But what about the user interface? I mean, all this security is great, but if the interface itself is clunky or has vulnerabilities, it kind of defeats the purpose, right?
You're absolutely right. A secure system needs a secure interface. Think of it like this. You wouldn't build a vault with steel walls and then put a flimsy wooden door on the front. Ecogate uses a framework called React for the greenBOX's user interface, which is known for being both user-friendly and secure.
Okay, so the framework itself is solid. But what about actually accessing the interface? Can someone just plug into the greenBOX's network and pull up the controls?
Not a chance. They've thought of that too. You can access the interface locally over the network. But even then, the connection is encrypted with SSL, the same technology that protects your credit card information online.
So no more plugging in a random laptop and hoping for the best. I like it. But what about when you're not on site? Let's say you're a plant manager and you want to check the system from home. How do you do that securely?
Remember that teleportation we talked about with Tailscale? That comes into play here as well. Authorized users can access the interface remotely through that same secure VPN connection.
So it's like having that secret passage into the fortress. But only authorized personnel know the combination. And even if someone copies the combination, the door is still reinforced steel.
Exactly. Ecogate is really setting a new standard here for this kind of industrial system. They could have easily taken shortcuts, but they recognize that security is paramount, especially in today's world.
It's reassuring to see a company take this so seriously, even for something like dust collection. If they're going to these lengths for this system, it makes you wonder about the security of other critical infrastructure, like power grids or water treatment plants.
It's a valid concern, unfortunately. Cybersecurity is often an afterthought, until something goes wrong. But Ecogate's approach with the greenBOX shows that it doesn't have to be that way. Security can be baked in from the start.
Absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here today, and I have to say, I'm impressed. For our listeners who are maybe just as fascinated by this as we are there any resources where they can learn more about the greenBOX's security features?
Definitely. Ecogate has a detailed white paper on their website that goes into even more technical depth. They've also got a Google Meet presentation available for anyone who wants a more in-depth walkthrough.
Fantastic. We'll make sure to include links to those resources in the show notes for this episode. So if you're the kind of person who likes to really geek out on this stuff, you'll definitely want to check those out. But for now, let's take a step back from the technical details for a moment. You know, it's funny. We've been talking about dust collection this whole time. And I have to admit, before we started this deep dive, I never would have thought it was this riveting,
Yeah, it's not exactly something you see on the front page every day, but the technology and the level of security involved, it's pretty fascinating once you start peeling back the layers.
Absolutely. But here's the thing that's been sticking with me. If Ecogate is going to these lengths to protect a dust collection system, what does that say about the state of industrial cybersecurity as a whole? I mean, shouldn't every system that controls critical infrastructure, like our power grids or water treatment plants, have this level of protection?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It really makes you wonder what we're taking for granted. We often only think about cybersecurity when there's a major breach or like a headline-grabbing attack.
It's like we only care about the lock on the door when someone's already broken in.
Exactly. Ecogate's approach with the greenBOX is a refreshing change. They're not waiting for a disaster to happen. They're proactively building security into the very foundation of their systems.
Which, frankly, is how it should be. It's like they're setting a new standard for the industry.
And hopefully, other companies will follow suit. Because the reality is, in today's interconnected world, security can't be an afterthought. It needs to be a top priority from the very beginning.
Well said. So for our listeners out there who are maybe just as intrigued by this as we are, what's the takeaway? What should they be thinking about after listening to this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is security matters, even in places you might not expect. Ecogate's greenBOX is a perfect example. It's not just about protecting data. It's about protecting our infrastructure, our economy, and even our safety.
Absolutely. And if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, don't stop here. We've only scratched the surface of industrial cybersecurity. Check out the resources we mentioned earlier. Do some more research and ask questions. The more informed you are, the better equipped we all are to face these challenges.
Couldn't agree more. Knowledge is power, after all.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of Ecogate's greenBOX security. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and stay secure.